In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you a strategy for booking 10 or more calls per month with hiring managers as a staffing or recruiting agency. And this is done without adding headcount or depending on referrals. Now, these are qualified calls with hiring managers who are actively looking to fill roles and have a reason to work with a recruiting or a staffing agency like your own. If you're watching this video, you're probably experiencing this red line right here, where some months are awesome. You're getting a lot of new flow of client conversations and that are leading to placements and deals. But other months, it's just stagnant, crickets. You're hoping for that next referral or hoping somebody finds you on LinkedIn or something. And hope is not a strategy. So I want to give you a strategy for producing those client conversations predictably where it can lead to more revenue in your business. Now, typically what happens if you're starting to experience some stress of not closing enough deals, you focus on the deals you're having or the sales conversations that you're having and figuring out what can I do in the pitch, how can I lower fees, and what can I do there. But the thing is, most agencies already close 20 to 30% of those sales conversations. So if you're having 4 sales conversations and closing 1, the problem isn't that you're closing only 1 out of 4. The problem is you only have 4 opportunities. And so what I want to show you is focusing higher up in the funnel. That's usually where the bottleneck is. And if we just feed you 10, 15, 20 sales conversations in a month, well, that solves all the problem right there. Now you can even start being more selective with the clients and work with less people, but still make more placements, drive more revenue, and focus on what really is the fun part of business rather than working with just anybody because you need the revenue. And so where did I learn this information? The last couple of years, I've been working with Fortune 500 clients like AT&T and NRG to drive more revenue and create client acquisitions systems that work in multiple markets. I'm based in Chicago. I've worked in Milwaukee, in Madison, in Jacksonville. So this has worked in multiple markets. And even before that, I ran a direct marketing business where I spent over 6 figures on Facebook ads, learned targeting, messaging, and what actually gets responses. And that's what led me to start Milestone Marketing, where we work with the recruiting agencies. And the key is really what you're seeing in this triangle, these 3 pieces that have showed up in every different market and sales environment that I've been a part of. And it starts with the market, the media, and the message. So I want to show you, how does this apply to recruiting agencies here? Well, the market is targeting the right person at the right time. The mistake a lot of people make is they just blast their messaging out to everybody, and it leads to generic messaging, and that generic outreach, it gets ignored. And so instead of targeting all companies, we want to find people who are, actually have a need for what we, can do. And so as a recruiting agency, you're looking for companies that are actively filling roles and the decision makers at those companies. How do we do this? Well, we look for hiring signals. You can look for signals on Indeed, on LinkedIn. You can see, as a company, did they just get a merger? Did they just get a bunch of funding? What is the signal that means they're probably looking to fill roles right now? And then after that, who is the right person to reach? Who's the decision maker? I don't want to talk with anybody on the talent acquisition team. I want to talk with the person who's making the decision and feeling the most pain. That's typically the hiring manager or the department heads. And so once you have the targeting right, it doesn't guarantee a response, but it sets the stage for us to actually reach out. Now, how do we actually reach out once we have the targeting right? Well, that's the media. What channel do we reach them on? There's a lot of different channels, and everyone has its benefits and trade-offs. The question is, which one works best for you? My recommendation is email, and there's a couple of reasons why. If we run through this, referrals, we just know we can't rely on them. They're awesome, they're great when they happen, but it's hard to make them happen. Networking can take a lot of time. Same thing with content before it starts to work. Paid ads aren't as targeted as you want them, and it can cost a lot as you're trying to figure that out. And cold calling can work, but it's not as precise. You're kind of interrupting people, and you got to have a lot of manpower that's dedicated to doing that. That's why we land on email, because email doesn't require that manpower. It's specific. It goes to the inbox, and business to business buyers actually prefer it. 77% of them, more than double any other channel, prefer to be communicated through email, because that's where they're actually working in the middle of their business hours. If they're on social media and they see a paid ad, maybe it's relevant, but it's not at the right time. So email is 28% of the working day by business professionals is actually spent in the email inbox, some studies say. That means about 2 hours a day, they're in the email. So we're not interrupting their day. We're meeting them where they already are, where they prefer to be met. And It's just the right, media. Now, that doesn't mean that email is just going to work. It actually can still fail, and you might have even tried it and it didn't work. Why? Well, there's a couple of reasons. First is the email didn't even get seen by that person. You could have wrote pure word gold. It could have been the greatest message ever, but it didn't get seen because the domain wasn't set up right, the SPF settings or the DKIM settings weren't right, or there was no warm up. And if you have a poor sender reputation on the inbox that you're sending from, it ends up just getting marked straight as spam and nobody actually sees the message. So you can't skip the infrastructure like a lot of people do. You need to set up the email inboxes the right way. And once you do that, what do you actually say? Well, what you say is really important because a lot of times if the spam filters don't mark it as spam, the person does. Because typical outreach usually reads like this. Hi, Sarah. My name is John. I'm a recruiter at Apex Talent Solutions. By the way, Apex Talent Solutions, if that's a real company, I just made it up. There's no beef. But anyway, we are a full service recruiting firm with over 15 years of experience helping companies, blah, 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 blah. Here's a link. I'd love to schedule a call. Boring. Why? Because it's long, it's generic, it's not specific to that person's problem, and it's immediately selling on your services rather than, talking about their pain, talking about what they actually care about. So that's why it gets blocked. So an example of good outreach, we call it a spear email. What a spear email is, it's a short, personal, expecting a reply email. So here's how that would read. Hi, Sarah. Noticed you have a few engineering roles open right now. We specialize in placing software engineers for SaaS companies and tend to move faster than your typical search. Worth a quick look. 3 sentences. And so if we're talking to Sarah, let's say Sarah is the head of the department for, talent acquisition. Well, guess what? She's responding because she's having problems filling that role. Or maybe she's the kind of person who's like, no, I don't want to work with a recruiting agency. That's fine too. What kind of response are we getting from a message like this versus this? Well, she's going to say, hey, I think I have this under control, but I'll keep you in mind. Thanks for reaching out. We're nice to them because we're not blasting them with a super long, boring, generic AI message. We're being very specific to her. She's going to be very specific and cordial, treat us like a person because we're treating her like one. So you see, that's a big difference with the messaging and why a lot of, basic messaging just doesn't work. So remember, spear emails. So us putting this all together, this is where we came up with the snowball method. So it starts controlled, we learn from the market, and then we scale. So first is setting up the infrastructure the right way, like I mentioned. If you don't set that up right, nothing else matters. Now, the downside of this is it takes 2 weeks before emails are warmed and can actually send. So for the first 14 days, we cannot send emails. That's why during that period of time, we're clarifying the market. We're doing some research to build a list of decision makers at roles or companies that are actively filling roles that you can place. So that's where we're clarifying the market and the targeting and making sure we're going to reach the right people. Once we have that together, the 2 weeks passed, emails are warmed up, we're starting to send out that messaging in a testing phase. This is where we're testing the different spear emails that we will write for you based on your ICP. We're going to see which starts to respond, and we're going to, as time goes on, track and improve. And you can see how this starts to snowball over time because we only get better and better, more targeted and more specific with the messaging. And this is how we're booking 10 or more calls a month with hiring managers for recruiting agencies within 30 to 60 days. Now, how does the math actually work here? Well, what we do is we start with sending 600 emails a day. And before you say that's a lot, there's 115,000 software engineering job posts just in January 2026. That's 600 a day. You might think is a lot. There's a lot more job postings happening that you're not even aware of. And so it's a matter of reaching as many people as we can. We can scale this up, scale this down, but for, simplicity, we're starting with 600. We're setting up 30 inboxes, sending 20 emails a day. That's how we get the 600 emails sent daily. From there, 5% response rate is what we're seeing. It's about 30 responses. Now, of those responses, not all are what we call positive or what what indicates interest. A lot of those responses are actually automated. I'm out of office, maternity leave, vacation, whatever. So there's nothing we're going to do with those. But the 3 responses that we do get where they're positive, they're like, yes, I want to learn more. Those are the people we're really focusing on. We're going to respond to them and have a conversation where Once they learn some information and they book a call and actually show up for the call, we're seeing about one person show up for the call for every 3 responses that we get. Now, because we work on Saturdays, we work 26 days a month. That's about 26 calls every month with hiring managers in your niche looking to fill roles that you can place. You can start to see how this actually impacts your business in a legitimate way. Now, these are conservative benchmarks and results can vary depending on your niche, the targeting, and the messaging. And so, you know, it can vary, but here's what we actually do for you, right? And you can see that, by the way, this doesn't have to work as good as I just described for this to make sense. But first, ideal client criteria. We figure out what are you actually looking for. We do the hiring signal research, make sure we're finding companies that are actively hiring for that role. We find the decision makers, verify those are the right contact details for that person. We build the infrastructure for you, the domains, the inboxes, the deliverability. Then we start that targeted outreach. We write those short, personal emails expecting a reply. Then we start to respond to the replies that we get. We turn that interest into booked calls on your calendar, and then we give you weekly reporting and updates on what we're testing, what's working, etc. Now, your job is to show up, close deals, and then share feedback so that we can sharpen this and get that to 26 or more calls every month. Now, what I'd love to do for you is create a new problem in your business where you have so many calls, you don't even know how you're going to handle all of them. Now, of course, we can scale that back, and that's where we need your feedback so that we're dialing this in directly to what you need. So if you're ready to see if this works for your business, the next step is pretty simple. We'll book a 20-minute call and we'll chat sometime this week. We'll look at your niche, the roles that you're trying to fill, and just see if this makes any sense. If it does, there's a setup fee and then a performance-based model from there, where it's a one-time setup fee, typically $2,000 to $5,000, depending on what we're deciding to build, and then performance-based, where you're only paying for the calls that actually show up and count as qualified. Now, on that call, we'll also agree upon what counts as qualified if we want to move forward. We'll build everything and go live as soon as possible. So you'll start seeing those emails warming up and you'll start seeing calls within the first month. So the next step, very, very simple. There should be a link below this video in the description, or you can respond to the email where we'll book a 20-minute call and we'll just see if this makes sense. I appreciate you watching this video and I look forward to talking soon.